little bit of a cheeky news roundup for you today. I don't know why today would be cheeky as opposed to a normal news roundup, but there's a lot of managerial stuff, and that makes sense because yesterday we had the story about David Moyes. We've had 3 stories from 3 separate journalists all saying the same thing. David Moyes is unhappy. David Moyes is unappreciated. He doesn't feel appreciated by the fans. He doesn't like the fact that his contract has been diluted, the powers within his contract, so he's going to leave. Now, with 10... I think with 24 hours, I was going to say 10, but 24 hours to reflect back on that. I do wonder if it might have been a shot across the bows from West Ham. He might have leaked it to his mates in the press. I don't know this. I'm assuming a lot of this stuff. But as I say, no smoke without fire. 3 stories to be the same. I would assume that it's been leaked to them. Is it for him to say to the board, come on, you better tie me down now? Contractually, not physically and literally tie him down, but you get what I'm saying. So I think off the back of that, there's been a lot of managerial talk. The first one, let's deal with Thomas Tuchel first, because Thomas Tuchel has come out and said, apparently, or has been quotes have been attributed to him, he has no interest in the West Ham job. Now, it sort of makes me laugh because I don't think he was asked, and I don't think he's been asked. And I think it's one of those situations whereby it's someone declaring they're not interested in something that they're not going to get anyway. It's a bit like me saying, you know what? I don't want to drive a Ferrari today. Well, do you know what? I'm not going to get much of a chance. I'm going to have to drive my Honda Civic instead. There was no Ferrari on offer today. And I just think it's a little bit like that. I'm not comparing West Ham to a Ferrari. Look, Thomas Tuchel has managed, and he is managing right now, one of the biggest clubs in world football. He did the same at PSG as well. Harry Kane went to Bayern Munich for a reason, because every season they win something. If they don't this season, and they won't win the league this season, the Bundesliga, it will be the first time in 11 seasons. You've got to do, you've got to work really hard, I think, at Bayern Munich not to win a trophy. And even when they don't win the Bundesliga, they'll win the German Cup, something like that. They always win trophies. They're not going to win any trophies this season. And it appears that he's fallen out with everybody there. If you believe all the reports you read in the press. And do I believe all the reports I read in the press? No, I don't. But I also read reports that he fell out with everybody at Chelsea and read reports that he fell out with everybody at PSG. So is somebody going around making up the same story about Thomas Tuchel, or does he just fall out with everybody? Look, I think his CV is overinflated. I think he's operated at clubs where you're almost guaranteed trophies, and one of those he ain't even going to win it anyway. And I think before that, I think his work at Borussia Dortmund was based and predicated upon, built on the foundation, let's say, of Jurgen Klopp before him. I'm not sure he's the right man for West Ham. I think he'd fall out with a lot of people at our club as well. So, look, he may not be interested. Well, don't worry. We're not interested in you, Thomas. I speak for myself, obviously. You might have a different opinion. Marco Silva, and this has really been interesting how this has been reported, because West Ham are interested in Marco Silva because we've become aware of his release clause. His release clause is something like 8.5 million, something like that. It's a lot of money. And that doesn't sit nicely alongside what we know of West Ham. I always thought that Fonseca was a believable one because he's out of contract and he'll be free. I've always thought, whilst West Ham will spend big on transfers, I've never thought we were a club that spent big on managers. I'll give you an example. Ruben Amorim, who's obviously the Sporting Lisbon head coach, he was at Braga before. Lisbon paid a big transfer fee, a similar amount actually. Do you know what? I've got it in my mind. I've got the figure of 8 in my mind. I've also got the figure of 11 in my mind. Whatever. They paid a lot of money to get him out of Braga. And even at that price, it was still not in the top 5 compensation packages paid for managers sort of worldwide. And that was quite a big one. West Ham don't get involved in that. So I find it hard to believe that we would pay that money for Marco Silva. But, Marco Silva, I think he's done very, very well for Fulham. But I don't think the owner is... I don't see Fulham spending big money anymore. I don't. It appears from the outside looking in, the club was bought with a move to moving it to Wembley. When Khan, who's obviously the Fulham owner, when negotiations broke down, it became clear he couldn't buy Wembley and move. What he wanted to do, I think, was move Fulham there, move a gridiron team, an NFL team over there. Once that didn't happen, then I think he's quite happy for Fulham to turn over and have an asset there. But I don't think they're going to be going and spending big money. Silva was quite loyal. Silva had a chance to go to one of the Saudi pro clubs in the summer. He chose not to do so. And I thought he was quite loyal. That was at the time when it looked like the club were ready to sell Polina, and they certainly were having trouble keeping hold of their star striker at the time, Mitrovic. I think he's done really, really good work at Fulham. Bearing in mind he loses players and he still has it up there. I think I'm liking the cut of Iraola's jib a little bit more at Bournemouth, but I would not be disappointed with Marco Silva. Let me put it that way. So that's really interesting there. Max Kilman, another link with Max Kilman again today. Wolves, so much of this stuff is rumoured, isn't it? Financial fair play, profit and sustainability regulations, all that sort of nonsense. Wolves might have to sell. I do think this one is very much predicated upon David Moyes being at West Ham next season. And the truth of the matter is we don't know. So when you're looking at some of these stories, you're trying to sort of cut through what's a good story or what is regurgitated. You know, journalists, particularly for some of these websites, have got to find stories. Are they regurgitating stories that are 3 months old or something like that? I don't know. Definitely there is an interest in Kilman from David Moyes. I'm not sure whether that translates to there being an interest in Kilman from Tim Steidten, who, as I understand, is going to have pretty much full control next season, or so I've heard, of West Ham transfers. Is the interest in him? I don't know. The truth of the matter is I don't know. But he's back in the news. Ben Johnson, he's going, he's just leaving, isn't he? Crystal Palace were the favourites. A couple of Dutch clubs have come in, including Feyenoord, which is quite interesting because obviously we were interested in their head coach at one point or another. We may still be in with him. That's really interesting. I've done too many videos on a slot, so I'm not going to do another one right now. But yeah, Ben Johnson to Feyenoord or another Eredivisie club is certainly an opportunity for him and one he might do. I don't know. For some reason I can just see Ben Johnson right back at Palace, particularly considering that they still play Ward there. Anyway, for Divin Mubama, it looks like it could well be Sunderland sniffing around. Why wouldn't they? I mean, they've already taken Elise, they've already taken Equa off of us, and why not? Look, the lad needs to play first team football. He's not getting a chance at West Ham. He's had it all now. He knows, he understands. Even when Antonio's injured, he will not play. Even when the first team are knackered, and David Moyes is even trying to close out a game, and you know, look knackered at the end, Antonio against Tottenham, Mubama's not going to play. There is no future for him at West Ham. So he's not only is he not going to get the contract he wants, he's not going to get any game time. I would be pleased for him as a person, as a player, to move on. Good for him. I like to look, if Moyes isn't going to use these players or they don't have a future at West Ham, then let them move on. The only other thing would be is let's use Marco Silva as an example. If Marco Silva knew he was taking a West Ham job next season, if we knew David Moyes was leaving, if maybe Marco Silva was to instruct the club and say, "Oh, keep him. I intend on using him." I'm talking about Mubama then. But even something like that, I would expect it to be Johnson would be advised to be retained far more than Mubama. One thing I'd say about Johnson, he can sign for Feyenoord now. Pre-contract agreement. Can't do that with domestic clubs. So, last but not least, it's not really a news story, but David Moyes was quite revealing actually in his press conference. I don't mean he took his kit off, but what he said in his press conference was Edson Alvarez. He hadn't spoken to Edson Alvarez about his yellow cards, but they were harming West Ham. But well, that's interesting. We all know they're harming West Ham. I thought, well, you probably need to have a word with him about it. Not that I think there's anything overly that can be done, as I've said on a number of occasions. I think Alvarez can't help himself. Certainly, it was evident during the Freiburg game, was unnecessary to get a card. And then when he picked up the one that took him over the threshold in the Premier League, it was avoidable. It really was. I just don't think he can help himself. It's a little bit feisty. I mean, David Moyes did suggest that it was perhaps because he couldn't get up to pace in the Premier League. He wasn't used to the pace in the Premier League. I don't believe that. He looks... Honestly, he's taking it like a duck to water. If you remember, we went down to 10 men in the game against Chelsea. David Moyes had not been putting him in the team, and he come on as substitute in that game. David Moyes made a substitute Alvarez on. Ever since he played in that game, I thought he's just looked completely fit for purpose in the Premier League. So I don't believe it's that he's struggling with the pace in the Premier League. He's brilliant. He's already an excellent Premier League midfielder. I don't think in that. I think he's just a bit feisty, and I don't think he can help himself. But yeah, I was interested that David Moyes hadn't spoken to him about it. And if that's true, David Moyes hasn't spoken to him about it, the first time Edson Alvarez is going to hear from David Moyes that he's harming West Ham season is going to be in that press conference. So I would hope it hasn't been done like that. There you go. There's your news roundup for today. I'd like to say with more things happening for the remainder of the day. There probably won't be. We've got a big game coming up tomorrow, and it is a big game, but I'll be dealing with that in the build-up to tomorrow's video. Obviously, myself, Gio, Charlie doing all the normal stuff ahead of tomorrow. Myself and Gio will be doing our breakfast show over on Patreon. If you've not checked Patreon out, please do. Give it a little look. We've got a free 7-day trial. The link's in the description below, patreon.com/Hammers Chat, Anton Ferdinand podcast, Ham Latest. We've got our Naked podcast, which is not West Ham. We have a bloody good laugh on that about all things. You set the agenda. You set the questions. Opposition previews, player ratings, breakfast show. Honestly, there's so much stuff over there. We're also giving away free signed West Ham shirts. Got competitions. There's tickets. We think it's excellent value. And also, by signing up to Patreon, you're going to get £5 off your ticket to go to the Colour Factory if you want to come and join myself and Gio and a lot of the rest of you Hammers chatterers for basically, we've got a fan zone. We've got a fan zone for the Leverkusen away game. If you can't go to Leverkusen, come and join us. The link to that will be in the description below. I'll catch up with you tomorrow.